The next speaker, who I have the pleasure of introducing, is the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, Luis Alberto Moreno. The IDB works to improve lives in Latin America and the Caribbean through financial and technical support to countries working to reduce poverty and inequality. It helps to improve health and education and to advance infrastructure. During President Moreno's tenure, the IDB has undergone a profound transformation of its organization, a significant generational change, and a record increase in the number of women in leadership positions at the institution. And before joining the bank, President Moreno served as Colombia's ambassador to the United States for 7 years. So please join me in welcoming President Moreno. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I know you had Big Bird, and it's kind of hard to compete, but I'll do my best. In any ways, I'm happy to see many faces and share Weston, who we've had the privilege of working over the years, and to all of you, to us really at the IDB, at the Inter-American Development Bank. This forum is an annual opportunity for all of us, not only to reach out, but more importantly, to learn from others in this very unique community. So every year, Jane and all her team do a fantastic job of really highlighting not only global themes, but more importantly, challenges that call for action. And I'm delighted that the topic this year that you've selected is the child, because as we all know, this is an area of focus that certainly we have at the bank, but more importantly, is something that is truly an impact on development. And as such, I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss with you not only the well-being of the children in our region, which is Latin America and the Caribbean, which is fundamentally our area of work. As everybody here understands, the experience of children during the critical initial phase of development will have tremendous repercussions throughout their lives and across all of our societies. And with this in mind, I would like to explore and talk to you about what it means today to be a child in Latin America. There are about 50 million children under the age of 5 in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. In broad terms, these kids today have a much brighter prospect than those who were born a generation ago. Infant mortality, for instance, has fallen by 55%, and a child born today can expect to live 8 years longer than those that were born in 1990. These kids will almost certainly live in a home that has access to safe water, since the penetration or the coverage has risen to about 96% of the total region's population. And they are more likely to grow up in a middle-class household, even though 1 generation ago, half of them lived in poverty. They will be part of smaller families, as the fertility rates have dropped to 2.1 births per woman from about 3.2 births per woman just in 1990. And finally, they're more likely to learn to read, to write, and to do basic math, as primary education today is basically universal and preschool enrollment is every day expanding. That said, if we look more closely, our youngest children still face immense challenges. They will grow up in the world's most unequal region in terms of income distribution. Those born into families on the bottom rung of the middle class are unfortunately vulnerable to falling back into poverty. And in 9 out of 10 infants under the age of 3 continue today to lack access to formal early childhood development services. Now, the latest statistic is particularly worrisome because of what we know about the impact of proper nutrition and early stimulation during the first 1,000 days of life. If we don't fix this, the huge gap between the haves and the have-nots in our region is likely to continue to expand. And not only that, this is where all the elements of violence are bred into a child. So we'll find it increasingly harder to catch up to countries that are far ahead of us in terms of developing and investing in their human capital. So how can we turn this situation around and effectively empower our region's youngest citizens? First, we can encourage governments to ramp up their spending on early childhood development services. In recent years, countries have devoted more resources to preschool, but we still spend too much on older kids. In fact, for every education dollar spent on children under the age of 5, more than $3 are spent on children aged 6 to 11. So there are cost-effective solutions, such as sending social workers on home visits to train parents or how to properly stimulate their children. Jamaica, for instance, obtained remarkable results on a very interesting pilot project back in the 1980s, and now Brazil wants to do many of the lessons there at a massive scale, potentially reaching millions of their poorest children. Second, besides the expansion of coverage, we have to strive for quality. And we must improve teacher and also caregiving training so they can provide meaningful and effective services. If not, we'll just be warehousing our kids. We did a big study in Ecuador that showed that a great number of teachers can make a huge difference. In fact, being exposed to an exceptional teacher can even help kids overcome the negative impact of a bad teacher. Third, we must emphasize the critical nature of relationships, whether they're at home, at a daycare, or at a school. Building a positive bond between the child and the caregiver, as we all know, is essential. This investment will pay off in cognitive development, benefits that will last well into adulthood. And fourth, and perhaps more importantly, we have to take action. And there's not a country that won't solemnly swear that early childhood development is their top priority. Yet it often seems to be an orphan issue with no one having overall responsibility for its proper implementation and supervision. This lack of ownership leads to poor coordination among government agencies, which in turn hinders the quality of services and produces poor results. And this doesn't exempt the rest of society from shouldering its share of responsibility. Now, we all must do our part. Citizens can contribute not only by holding governments accountable, but also by championing early childhood development. Companies can provide and/or subsidize quality daycare services for their employees. Foundations can also help to pilot innovative alternatives. And universities can carry out research that helps expand the knowledge of what works and what doesn't. And we can all do more to push gender parity, especially to promote greater male involvement in child rearing. That, certainly for Latin Americans, will be a big revolution. Now, this forum's second theme, which is about trust, really resonates with us at the IDB, as it weighs heavily not only in economic, but equally in social and institutional development. It's pretty settled that trust is the driver of economies, as countries with high levels of trust tend to experience higher and more stable growth. And there's plenty of research by economists about this very issue. Unfortunately, in our region, is the only one in the world where trust continues to decline. In fact, Latin Americans have less trust in public institutions than they did, say, 2 decades ago. Yet while the recent wave of uncovered corruption scandals throughout our hemisphere will probably weaken that trust, in the short term, I'm positive that in the long term, they might lead us to better outcomes and to a rebuilding of trust. And in that context, I truly believe we're in a turning point in Latin America where no longer societies are willing to ignore dishonesty and corruption in government. And that message is every day coming loud and clear, as we are largely a middle-income society that not only has middle-income spending habits, but more importantly, middle-income or middle-class values. And the challenge, therefore, will be to transition from the reactive protests that we witness almost daily in our streets to really addressing the root causes of corruption by building more inclusive and transparent and public institutions. We at the IDB devote billions of dollars every year to this very cause and to supporting the kinds of institutional reforms that can make precisely that difference. That sounds like a lot of money, but we think it's not enough. That's why we value partnerships so much. And just as trust is essential to engaging constituents, it is critically important to engage partners as well. Because once we establish that trust, there are no limits to what can be achieved by working together. Now, let me give you some examples of how we have built trust and, more importantly, collaborated with partners to promote early childhood development. Karen Spencer, who will speak later, I know, in this forum, leads an organization called Whole Child International. With support from another IDB partner, the government of Korea, Whole Child has piloted new effective and low-cost approaches to improving child care in Central American orphanages. Not only did this partnership engage caregivers, they also worked with government officials and administrators, raising awareness of the importance of evidence-based practices. In another example, we worked with Shakira. You all know Shakira, I'm sure, and the Alas Foundation to recognize outstanding individuals and organizations in the field of early childhood development. And in a broader alliance, we have involved the Gates Foundation, the Fundación Carlos Slim, and the government of Spain, who have backed a very interesting results-based financing mechanism to encourage countries to improve maternal and child health care. The strong partnership we have built with these actors has done a great deal to improve the lives of families across Central America, directly benefiting over 1.8 million women of reproductive age and children aged less than 5 years, while indirectly benefiting an additional 4.5 million people in this region, but more importantly, concentrating in the poorest 25% of the region. Now, that example is where trust was a key ingredient to making this partnership work, and more importantly, to allow innovation to occur. Change can be, as we all know, a scary thing. And certainly in the public sector, we all know how risk-averse they are. So it's very important for us to find partners precisely willing to take the chances on new approaches. Over the past year, we have been working closely with the FEMSA Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, the Maria Cecilia Soto Vidigal Foundation, Porticus, Promotora Social, among many others, who think about how we can collectively build trust and generate innovation. Specifically, we're looking at how to finance new approaches that will allow us to scale up solutions in key aspects of early childhood development, from improving service quality to training parents, to mainstreaming early childhood development into traditional health and nutrition spaces and plans that can generate better data and research on these topics. And as you can see, we have much more work to do. In many ways, we're still a very young region, a region full of promise and opportunity. But we will have to work much harder to make this true for all of our children. Making quality early childhood development universal is the key to this success. And that, of course, should be our goal. So I want to again thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come here, to invite you to be very much a part of this challenge. My colleagues are here. They're happy to work and network with you and look at opportunities that you might want to develop together in Latin America. And certainly I look forward to many of your discussions and, more importantly, to successful partnerships. Again, thank you very much for having me.